Acknowledge that I was his wife.
Oh, that sounds familiar. That happened to
You've
my
heard that
girlfriend.
before? I'm not the first one.
This is all on Zoom. Everything's on Zoom. Zoom.
Oh, that's why they have the
Yeah.
hypnosis.
מזמור לדוד, אדוני מי יגור באוהליך, מי ישכון בהר קודשך, הולך תמים ופועל צדק ודובר אמת בלבבו. לא רגל על לשונו, לא עשה לרעהו רעה וחרפה לא נשא על קרובו. נבזה בעיניו נמאס, ואת ירא אדוני יכבד, נשבע להרע ולא ימיר. כספו לא נתן בנשך, ושוחד הנקי לא לקח. עושה אלה לא ימות לעולם. A psalm of David. Are we deserving to enter into God's sanctuary? Can we merit a place in the presence of the divine? We strive to live with integrity, to do what is right, to speak truth without deceit, to have no slander upon our tongues, to do no evil to others, to not mistreat our neighbors, spurn a contemptible person, but honor those who revere you. Never retract a promise once made, though it may bring you harm. Lend no money at unfair rates, accept no bribe against the innocent. Make these deeds your own, then you shall stand firm forever. Adonai rohi lo echsar mino teshe yarbitzeni al mei menuchot yenahaleini nafshi yeshovev yancheni v'magle tzedek yancheni v'magle tzedek leman shemo gam ki elech begeit salmavet lo irara ki ata imadi shivtecha umishantecha hema hema yenachamuni taruch lefanai shulchan neged sorerai nishanta vashemen roshi kosi revaya ach tov v'chesed yirdefuni kol yamei chayai ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים. אדוני רואי לא אחסר. The one who was, the one who is, the one who will be is my shepherd, I shall not want, giving me repose in green meadows, leading me beside the still waters to revive my spirit, guiding me on the right path, for that is God's essence. Though I walk through a valley of the shadow of death, I fear no harm, for you are with me. Your staff and your rod comfort me. You prepare a banquet for me in the presence of my foes. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and kindness shall be my portion all the days of my life. Friends, we gather here on this gorgeous day with heavy hearts as we accompany Renee Lang to her final resting place. We find ourselves at the end of this season of the Yamim HaNoraim, the season of holy and awesome days. And as we quote unquote get back to normal, there's nothing normal about being here today. There's nothing normal about coming together and doing what we have to do. And yet at the same time, our leaving this world is a guarantee. So we gather today with hesitation, with heavy hearts, but at the same time we know that the end is in store for all of us. It's difficult to talk about endings in a week of new beginnings. This Shabbat, Jews around the world will read Parshat Bereshit. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim et haaretz. In the beginning of God's creating the heavens and the earth. We learn, though, that even this beginning of creation was not really a beginning. Rashi says, questions. We read just half a verse later, Beruach Elohim merachefet al pnei hamayim, that the Spirit of the Divine was hovering above the waters. And says, wait a minute, waters don't get separated until later on in creation. How is it already that the water exists? And so Rashi encourages us to translate Bereshit bara Elohim not as we are so familiar with as in the beginning God created, but in the beginning of God's creating, the process was already underway. And so the very act of creation is both connecting to our past, is an ending, and is a new beginning. I invite us to consider this day, to consider Renee's life and legacy in the same way. Not only do we mourn the passing of a matriarch, of a Holocaust survivor, of a generation leaving this world with fewer and fewer people to tell their stories. Not only do we recognize our responsibility to connect to those stories, to connect to those narratives, our responsibility to continue to strive to build Jewish life, to build the lives that she and so many others fought and died for. But to recognize that doing so is also a creative act that will continue to carry her legacy, her memory in our own ways. That when we say Ti nishmata tzora b'tzora chayim, that her soul should always be bound up in the bond of living, that we the living have the opportunity to consider and to create her legacy. That we the living have the opportunity to choose which stories we tell. We the living have the opportunity to choose the memories that are brightest, that are most joyful, and to carry those forward. And in doing so, have an opportunity to affect future generations. It's my most sincere hope and prayer today that not only does Renee's legacy live on, but that legacy be true and enduring and heartfelt, be loving, and bring warmth and blessing to each and every one of us. I'll have the opportunity now to hear from Renee's children. I invite Ron to come on up and share a few words.
Hi everyone. I'm not used to public speaking, so I'm going to be very brief, just to honor my mom. And she accomplished a lot in her life. Her teenage years were in the Holocaust, but she always remembers her older brother, Rowley, who she looked up to. And there's a little story, he would encourage her to walk a little further and keep going when they had to go somewhere and she wanted to stop. And even in her last years, she would love to walk her dog, Tootsie, and we would go to the park and she would pick up the little twigs that are on the ground, and she would count, like every 10 steps she would take a twig and say, this is the first one, a little bit more, and a little bit more. So even when she didn't feel like walking, she would keep going for a while and remember her brother. And she came to this country with nothing and made a life, and met my dad, who I think she's honored to be next to him now. And just remember a few people in her life. There was what we called Aunt Bertie and Uncle Willie, are sort of like adopted grandparents to Carol and myself, and she knew them from Europe, but they were in Cleveland and were a big part of our family. And of course my dad, who we love so much, she's next to him, and they built up a life, and from the American dream. And in beautiful parts of Cleveland, they made a successful life, and Carol and I were their pride, even though they don't always. My mother was not an emotional person. She didn't show emotion, and she was pretty matter of fact, but she, I think, was very proud of us. We both graduated college and had, our own lives. So my mom always worked hard. She worked at the May Company and in the bank, and I think she enjoyed dealing with the public and, trying to provide whatever she could. She was happy to see all her grandchildren, and it's tough that we were out of town, but our grandchildren got to know her. And my mom was a tough cookie in many ways. She's very opinionated, and she told you what she meant. She didn't pull any punches. And I think she was happy to be in this country and happy to have people around. She did have some strong friendships of her own friends that for many years, and gave them some support. And I think we just need to think of the good times. We had nice vacations and family things, and good people in our life, and I'm just happy that all of you could join us here. Thank you.
Okay. I'm glad you could all be with us today. And I don't have too much more to add. No good? No more? Okay. I'll just add a few more words. I think if there's one word that summarizes my mother's entire existence, It's the word survivor. And I think she was a survivor from the age of 15, when she was separated from her parents, until the last day before she passed away. She was always a fighting survivor. She just wouldn't give up. And in everything she did, in every way, she made it very clear that she wanted it her way and no other way. And she told us very, very clearly, when my father passed away in 2004, I'm going to die in this house. I promised Dad the only way I will leave this house is with my feet out first. And unfortunately, she didn't succeed to doing that, but she almost did. She almost made it. She was in her own house until the age of 93 and a half, and until March of this year. And I think that's quite an accomplishment. It's nothing so you can take it and forget it. And I think the main reason she did is because of a strong will to fight. And not because she didn't need the more supporting surrounding, but only because she absolutely refused to give up her independence. I think the person that knows that the most is the lady sitting in front of me here, Vanessa, who was her major partner for the last 2.5 years of her life. And my mother sure fought it. She kicked and yelled and pushed, and I don't know how many times she fired Vanessa.
Yes.
But Vanessa was very, very determined and very, very loyal. And she knew that we were far away, and that if she gives in, my mother would be left totally alone. Because first of all, she wouldn't let anybody in the door. And Vanessa sometimes came in, even when my mother told her, get out of here. But she certainly went through an awful lot in the last 2.5 years. But she was the last to see my mother alive. She held her hand until this Monday morning, when my mother was transferred to the hospice at Walensky. And I have no words to describe my brother and my appreciation of her love and tenderness and her sense of determination. Believe me, my mother refused to shower, refused to change clothes, refused to eat, refused everything. But Vanessa has some wonderful sense of somehow she convinced her. I don't know how. I wasn't there. I only heard about it. But when I came here in March and when I came here in June, I saw how my mother's look, how she looked at Vanessa's eyes. And even if she couldn't really say how much she appreciated her look of love, that was worth more than any word she could say. And I want you to know that I think my mother's motto for life was, when there is a will, there is a way. And she did things against all odds. She was actually left alone at the age of 15. I find that hard to even imagine today, being alone at the age of 15. But she was separated from her parents at the age of 15. At the age of 18, in April of 1945, she was released from Bergen-Belsen concentration camp in Poland. And from that day, she was totally alone. But she had the strength of mind and the determination to build a new life for herself, which I don't know how she did it. I mean, I find it hard to understand. I know how I was at the age of 18. I was a kid at the age of 18. But she decided at that very day, she chose to live. I mean, many people that were released from the camps reacted in all kinds of ways. But she reacted in a very strong, determined way. And she knew she needed to build a new life in a new country. And she only returned to Vienna to make sure to look under every stone to see if there's any sense of anybody that remained in her family. And as soon as she knew that she was the only surviving member of her family. She decided she doesn't want to stay on Austrian soil. She doesn't want to hear the German language. She didn't suffer hearing the German language. The only time she would speak German when I was a child was when my dad and her didn't want Ron and I to understand what they said. And then they would say something quietly in German. But otherwise, she wouldn't say a word in German. And she wouldn't buy a German car, and she wouldn't buy a German anything, because she wanted to put her past aside. And she made a very firm decision that day or that year that she was released from the camps. I want to live. And I want to live as well as I can. And she showed in every way that she was determined. So in 1948, when she came to New York and she went by the Statue of Liberty, she knew that this is what she's going to choose. And I think she appreciated the sense of freedom and living in the United States more than any of us here, because she knew what it is to live without freedom, that none of us have experienced. And so I think her basic values accompanied her entire life. One was to appreciate freedom. Another one was a belief in hard work. My brother and I started part-time jobs. My brother was a plain dealer boy or a press boy, a press boy, and I worked at the Shaker Library when I was 15 years old. We started working when we were very young, and I think it did us a lot of good, and that's because both my mother and my father believed in hard work, and they wouldn't waste any effort in any type of work that she could, just to be able to bring her family up and make sure that Ron and I got the education and the comforts and everything that we needed. So hard work was a very important value in her life. And also, she believed that you live a modest life according to your own means. I know the values that she taught brother and I mean, we believe that till today. I mean, my mother wouldn't buy herself a pair of socks if she didn't have the money. One thing she made very clear, you do not spend a cent that you don't have in the bank. Okay, I can tell you, my husband and I built ourselves 2 homes. And we built ourselves 2 homes with no mortgage, because I drove him crazy. and everything she believed in definitely influenced the way that I live today, and I guess the way that I educated my children, and who knows, whatever. But her strong sense of values definitely was ingrained into my blood system. And I think that's one thing that maybe she wasn't sophisticated and she didn't have the opportunity to have formal education, but she certainly made sure that Ron and I knew her sense of values and how important these things are. Since my mother was widowed in 2004, she lived a pretty lonely existence. And Ron and I tried to convince her in many opportunities, you could do it easier, you could live a more comfortable life, why do you stay in your house? But she made a promise to my father, and she lived the way that she believed in. And as much as we tried to persuade her that she would be in a place where she'd have more people around her, she'd have an easier sense, she wouldn't have to drive, she wouldn't have to worry about everything, she insisted to stay on Green Road. And I hope that she knows that we respected her wishes. Especially, I was the one that had to take her out of her home. I don't know how many of you know, but in the month of March, she had a setback in her health, and I came to Cleveland when she was hospitalized, and I was the mean one that had to make the very difficult decision to move her from her loved home and to separate her from her great companion, which was her little dog, Tootsie. So I know I did this according to what I thought at that time would be best, because I just couldn't get on a plane and go back to Israel and see her alone in that big house when she wasn't well. So I'm asking for her forgiveness in your presence, that we tried to respect her wishes until the last day. We really did. And it tore my heart and tore Ron's heart to make a decision against her will. But I know the care that she received at Walensky, which was the unit that she was in, I saw from the warmth and the caring of the staff there that they tried in every possible way to make her as comfortable as could be possible in these last few months. So in front of you, I want to ask for my mother's forgiveness that we couldn't allow her to be alone. And I think the person that held her hand last is sitting in front of us. And I want to tell Vanessa how much we appreciate every single thing that she did for the last 2.5 years, because she certainly didn't have an easy time. And she was very, very determined. I mean, I saw her in action, and I saw my mom throw her out. But Vanessa was so loyal and so loving and so tender. We appreciate every day, every hour that she spent with my mom. And I know the last few weeks of her life, she couldn't express it. She wasn't speaking to us. But she held Vanessa's hand, and she held out her hand, and she asked for Vanessa to hold her hand. And she was such a great comfort these last few weeks when she was so alone and so weak and suffering so. So we know this was her time to go. And we hope that now finally she has some peace of mind. Finally she can rest and she can stop fighting. Because I can tell you, she certainly was some fighter. So I know that my very existence, everything I do, my way of thought, my choices in life were very much affected by my mother's values and her Holocaust experience. And I hope in some way these things will be remembered through the values that I learned and the way I pass it on to the future generations. So I wish with you that you will finally rest in peace.
Rabbi, can I speak for 2 seconds? I just want to acknowledge 2 things. One is about family, and Manny's sister Hannah was a very important person in the lives of the Langs growing up. Hannah, her children, her grandchildren, they may not have had the most loving relationship at all times, but they were family, and I think that that's really important. And I, in turn, became a part of that family, and I was grateful for that. I want to end with a funny story. In the last, 10 years since I started wearing these glasses, every single time I would see Renee, she would say, "Barb, hi, are those new glasses?" And I would say, "Yes." She'd say, "I don't like them." And when she saw Stephanie, her granddaughter, she'd say, "Are those new glasses?" Stephanie would say, "Yes." Just say yes. And she said, "They're too big for you." So she did not hold her tongue. She let everyone know how she felt most times. So on that note,
Barbara, I was just thinking how lovely those glasses looked on you.
I wore them in honor of Renee.
In just a moment, we'll lower the aron, the casket, and then place the vault lid atop, and then proceed with the kfura, with the burial. What we do when we accompany our loved ones to their final resting place is a true act of loving kindness. It's something that we do for those we care about, a gift that we give them that cannot be repaid. So I'll invite first our mourners and then all who are present when the time comes to place as many shovels full of earth as you're comfortable and able to atop the aron, and we'll try to cover the aron as best as we can. There are a few customs that symbolize our hesitancy to do what we've come here to do today. Often for the first shovelful, you'll see people use the back of the shovel, and similarly, we don't eagerly pass the shovel from hand to hand, but return it to the earth for the next person to take. אשיר למעלות אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי. עזרי מעם אדוני עושה שמיים וארץ. אל ייתן נמות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך. הנה לא ינום ולא יישן שומר ישראל. אדוני שומרך, אדוני צילך על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה וירח בלילה. אדוני ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך. אדוני ישמור צאתך ובואך מעתה ועד עולם. A song for ascents. I turn my eyes to the mountains. From where will my help come? My help comes from the maker of heaven and earth, the one who will not let your foot give way. Your guardian will not slumber. The guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. Your protection, a guardian at your right hand. By day the sun will not strike you, nor the moon by night. Ribono shel olam, guard you from all harm and guard your life. Guard your going and your coming, now and forever. Al Mekoma Tavo v'Shalom. We pray in this moment that Renee Lang go unto the Holy Blessed One in peace. I'll invite our mourners and all those gathered together to come forward as we engage in this mitzvah, this message shel emet, and try to cover the lid of the aron as best as we can.
Along the board. Go from the bottom.
She really didn't complain. I mean, she didn't talk about her problems. No. She kept it to herself. I didn't know what kind of life she had. She didn't like making me feel sorry for her. Well, that's very, that'd be a strong person to do that. To me, I complain a little bit. Yes.
You were her caretaker, huh? That'd be a hell of a job.
I just told her it was pink last week. But you know what? That's what it should I lift weights. I guess I'm not doing enough.
No more, I don't blame you.
But anyway, like I said, but the thing is that the rabbi who said that I could not do this. When we were inside, he said, besides which I have a bad leg and a bad back, that's all I need. Right. I mean, that's just like I say, I'm a complainer. I don't know if it's physical or emotional or both. But my whole body just took a toll. Yeah. And then I lost my husband a few weeks ago. Yeah. Because his daughter said he wanted me to come to the cemetery. They said, come last time. They had the distance away to give away. They didn't acknowledge that I was his wife. Yeah. Yeah. And the eulogy was my name was not even put in. As his wife.
Well, who made the funeral arrangements? You were.
The daughters.
That's why.
They could include me. They didn't even, I had to go have someone that brought me to the cemetery. They didn't even.
I got the same situation.
So you know what it's all about.
Hatzor Tamim, the perfect rock whose work we perceive, reveals a faithful God, true, upright, and honest. The rock is perfect in every way. Dare we ask God to account for any deed? Hashalit b'mata u'v'ma'al. God rules below and on high, causing death and giving life. Morit she'ol v'ya'al, bringing down to the grave, but raising up as well. Hatzor Tamim, the rock is inscrutable. Dare we question Mata Aseh, what have you done? When God's every word comes to be immediately. Hatzor Tamim, the rock is unfathomable, but just and patient, and Malei Rachamim, filled with compassion. God, have pity for parents and children. Ki lecha Adon haslichot v'rachamim, as forgiveness and compassion are yours. You are just in the giving and in the taking. In your hand is the essence of all spirit. You would never permit the impact we made to fade. So consider us keenly, for you are the master of compassion and forgiveness. Adam in ben shana yihiyeh, were immortal to live but a single year, even 1,000, kalo haya yihiyeh, it would not seem enough. Baruch Dayan ha'emet, we therefore praise the judge of truth, who takes but who also gives life. We know that your discretion is beyond us. We know that your word is good, but your judgments at times puzzle us. And though we may brood over harsh realities, Tzaddik Atah, we place our trust in you and accept our lot and our loss, and the love that remains with us forever. Rachem al fleitat tzon yadecha, have mercy upon us and strengthen us to maintain our courage at this time of sorrow. Adonai Natan v'Adonai Lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevorach. I invite us to rise. El Malei Rachamim shochen b'amromim, Ametzei menucha nechona tachat kanfei השכינה, במעלות קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר רקיע מזהירים, את נשמת רני לנג שהלכה לעולמה, בגן עדן תהי מנוחתה. אנא בעל הרחמים, מסתיריה בסתר כנפיך לעולמים, וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתה. אדוני הוא נחלתה, ותנוח בשלום על משכבה, ונאמר אמן. El Malei Rachamim, exalted and compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure to the soul of Renee Lang, who has gone to her eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life. May she rest in peace. And we say, Amen.
Amen.
In just a moment, we'll recite the words of the Kaddish Yatom, the Mourner's Kaddish, the Orphan's Kaddish, after which we'll escort our mourners back to their cars. We don't linger, but we get on to the important work of memory, the important work of grief, the important work of moving forward. Due to this pandemic we find ourselves in, there will not be visitation, but donations can be made in Renee's honor and memory to the Jewish Family Service Holocaust Survivor Program at jfsa-cleveland.org. Invite us to recite these words together. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, בעמד יברח חירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון וחיי בכל בית ישראל, בגלה ובזמן קריב יאמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ולעולמיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דמירם ביעלמה ואמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומה הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו amen. The one who makes peace in heaven make peace for us here on earth as well, bring peace and comfort to all who mourn, and we say, Amen. Before we leave the graveside, we say, Hamakom Yinachem Etchem B'toch Sha'av Le'Tzion Yerushalayim. May the Holy One who is found in every place bring all of you comfort. For we are people who know what it is to mourn for Zion and Jerusalem.
Should I make a shura, Rabbi? Can we make this? Folks, one last tradition that we're going to follow here is I'm going to ask family and friends to create an aisle. The people to my left, the people to my right, facing one another. This aisle is called a shura. It's right down this way. And we're going to ask the official mourners first to pass between their family and friends down walking through the shura. And then the other family members will follow behind, and then the friends will follow behind.